We're expecting to get sandbox on every island, maybe even as soon as this week. Let me help you make. Wait, stop, 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 stop. It was announced today that sandbox will be expanded to all islands tomorrow. And of course, I had to record and edit this entire video yesterday. You're going to hear some woulda, coulda, shoulda in this video since I didn't know what we know today. Isn't that always the case? Anyway, in this video I'm going to give you 5 tips for building a beautiful 5-star park on Isla Tacaño. Coming right up. Hi, I'm Lianne, the obsessive compulsive park builder behind this channel. I want to help you build the best parks with 2 videos every week. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a thing. I've restarted Tacaño twice, so I have 2 versions to show you. We're going to do a quick tour through both parks, and I will share 5 tips with you that will inspire you to build something awesome on your own Isla Tacaño. And I'm going to give you a mini tutorial on how to build this structure. Before we get into that, first a public service announcement. I have also redone Pena and Muerta, and I have tips for building on those islands as well. I think these 2 islands are much more challenging to build on than Tacaño, and I have a couple of really essential tips for you. Which island would you like to see next? Comment either Pena or Muerta below. Obviously, I've built these parks before Sandbox was expanded to include every island, which means the parks are completely practical, having power plants and meeting dinosaur requirements with the help of Dr. Wu. So if we don't get Sandbox until December to coincide with the leaked 1993 DLC, or if we don't get Sandbox at all, you can still use these tips to build on Tacaño as we know and love it today. Just go into your save file and sell and delete everything you've built so you have a clean slate to work with. We're going to get right into tip numero uno, twin monorail stations. This is the entry point from where a long path leads into the park. On either side I've placed monorail stations. These twin monorail stations are a great use of this narrow space. If you want to keep the path centralized, coming straight out of the arrival point, there isn't much space left on either side of it, but you can fit the monorail stations in. Having your first monorail station close to the entry point boosts your transport rating immensely, and I'm recommending 2. For starters, the twin tracks look really cool curving out to either side, but more importantly, Tacaño is all about the vistas, and you want your guests to have an unobstructed view when they first come into your park. If you have just one station, either the station itself or the track would clutter up the view. Also, since Tacaño is so narrow and stretched out, I don't want the monorail track to loop, because then you're going to have 2 tracks at every area of the park. If you start with only one station at the entry and you don't let it loop, only a single train will run along the track, because it has to be able to go back and forth. By splitting it into 2 separate transportation systems, you have a train each. I'm sure it doesn't actually affect rating, but it makes a lot more sense to have more than one train servicing the entire park, especially considering over 12,000 people are currently guests on this island. My second tip for building a beautiful park on Tacaño: use the view to your advantage. You want to take beautiful shots of your park when it's done, and a good backdrop makes it all the better. Tacaño has this amazing central lagoon that your park more or less embraces. This inland bay is lined with cliffs that give a perfect view of the waterfalls on the far end. What I've done is I've built a square like a viewpoint right on the edge of the cliff. A bit of makeshift architecture enhances the purpose of this area, directing you towards the lagoon. By enclosing this area, it feels more exclusive, and a bit of path design makes it stand out. These 2 hotels, of course, also have a great view of the lagoon, as does a hotel in the right wing of the park. From the rooftop terrace, you actually get a nice view of the park and the viewpoint that I've built. If guests prefer a room with an ocean view, there is a 5th hotel at the very left from which you could see this great mountain range lining the coast. Building hotels and other guest facilities in these areas makes sense from a real-life perspective. Treat your park as if it's a real place, and great design will follow from there. Tip number 3. Use the cliffs on the inland side of the island as backdrops for your exhibits. With a bit of fiddling, you can get the edge of the buildable area to serve as the 4th wall of your enclosure. The steep cliffs provide a natural perimeter to the exhibit and a more grand backdrop for your dinosaurs. When you first arrive on Tacaño, before you build anything, have a look around. Really study the geography of the island so you can use it to your advantage. Cherry pick the best spot to serve as a view from a viewing gallery or hotel rooftop. That's a great starting point. I'm actually cheating because as I'm writing this, and yes, this is scripted, I'm trying to be professional and organized and not just word vomit into the microphone. I realized I could have grouped this with tip number 2, but then I'd only have 4 tips, and my instincts say 5 are better, so I'm just going to keep it as a separate tip. The 4th tip will be a little less useful once Sandbox is made available, but it's still of help. The right location for your operations. Of course, in Sandbox, you won't need power plants and even a ranger station won't be necessary, but you'll always need an ACU center and at least one creation lab. In my 2 parks, I've chosen 2 different spots. I will show you both and tell you which I think is best. In my first park, I split operations up in 2. I deemed these spots to be the best to sacrifice for the operations. I really wanted to make full use of this left end of the park. In my second park, however, I took a different approach, which I think is better. I grouped everything together in this lower part of the island in the far left. It does cut this area down in half, unfortunately, but keep in mind that you'll waste a lot less space when this island is playable in Sandbox, as you'll only need a fraction of these buildings. Actually, I realized that I only needed about half anyway. I had erred on the side of caution and I had built way too many power stations. The reason I think this is the best placement for these buildings is because you can keep it fully separate from your guest area. In my other park, the monorail had to go over these buildings, but this is the kind of behind-the-scenes stuff that you don't really want your guests to see, nor do you want it to show up in your screenshots. I'm interrupting our regularly scheduled programming to give you a tutorial that you didn't ask for. To build this particular structure, which is just a random bit of architectural interest to my T-Rex exhibit, just follow these steps. Don't worry, this will only take 2 minutes. I mean, it'll take 2 minutes to show you. It took me about 20 minutes to build. I've laid out some guidelines with the path so I can build a perfectly symmetrical shape with the monorail tracks. To start with, let's place a monorail right in this very corner, getting it as close as possible, which will be mirroring on the other side. Then I drag it out a maximum length and a minimum length just for good measure. Repeat on the other side. Then connect these 2 points, letting the mechanics of the monorail track create a perfect arch for you. Now I'm adding to my guidelines with a bit more path because I want the ends of the track to be at an angle. What you're going to do next is start your next track from the center, not the end, because you can get the tracks a lot closer together this way. The downside is that it is very tricky, sometimes impossible, to have the ends then line up perfectly, because they snap together being that close, which is why I am ending them at this angle. Drag the other side out to the guideline we previously placed. Repeat on the other side and, again, connect the 2. Repeat, repeat, repeat until you are satisfied, if it's in your nature to be satisfied. Finally, you get rid of the unnecessary bits of your guidelines and instead add path to make it a usable space and to get rid of the excessive amount of pillars. Presto! You're done. Let me know if you could use more mini tutorials like this in future videos. Now let's get back to the actual video. Finally, tip number 5. It's easy to add design to guest areas. It's difficult to add design to exhibits. So keep your exhibits small and few and far between, and your guest areas large. This controversial tip applies to pretty much every island. It's controversial because, as people have told me many times, Jurassic World Evolution is a dinosaur game. It should be about the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs should be the most important thing in the park. Look, I flip out over a new dinosaur edition as much as the next person. But at the end of the day, we build our parks in a universe where people care more about the kind of game they can play in the arcade than the dinosaur that is on display. And I don't even think that's all that unrealistic. Generally, our modern day zoos waste a lot of space on looking beautiful for guests. And since we don't have massive maps to work with, it's gotta be a give and take. You've come here for tips on building a beautiful park. If not, I'm sorry. This video must have been a huge waste of time for you and a major disappointment, and I'm sorry. But if you've come here for building a beautiful park, I just gotta say it's easier to beautify guest areas than exhibits. There's just more you can do with it in terms of making it unique. Whereas exhibits tend to look more or less the same. There are a couple of varieties you can make with the new terrain tools, but still, generally speaking, they look kind of similar at the end of the day. Obviously, having Tacaño as one giant Jurassic truck tour would be beautiful too. And I'm probably going to do that next because that does sound pretty awesome. But then the game is doing all the work for you, so that doesn't really provide any kind of challenge in terms of building a beautiful park. I want to challenge myself by adding to the beauty of the island, not just using it. But if you want to see a cliffside truck tour, we should hop on over to my Muerta restarts, because that's exactly what I did there in combination with a beautiful park design. Again, let me know where you want to go next for park building inspiration, Pena or Muerta. But for now, this was Tacaño and my 5 tips for building on this island. I hope seeing my 2 versions of this island was an inspiration for you. Share your own tips in the comment and give this video a like if it inspired you for your next park. Thanks for watching, and until next time, enjoy the game!